So we have our panelists here, and Zara, I'll promote her to a co-host as well. So we have a small group here today. Thanks for holding on with us and joining. And we'll also be recording this so we can send it out to individuals as well. Yeah.
Hello. I can't turn on my video either.
Oh, here, I'll promote you to co-host and then.
Okay.
Awesome, but Cassidy and Zara, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we can get started. For those here, this is one of a series of Lifeology webinars where we chat about science communication topics. So we're really excited to have the authors of our How to Address Conspiracy Theories Lifeology course here today, chatting about that topic. So
sounds good. Would you like to go first, Sarah?
Sure. Hello, my name is Zara. I've been working as an illustrator for the last 5 years. Science has never been my strongest subject, but I've been really happy to hear what Cassidy has to say.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassidy. Science is my favorite, but illustrating is something that I need to work up my skills on, so we'll call it even. I am a science communicator. I currently go to school doing my master's at the University of Ottawa, and I also work there. And right now I'm developing a course on science communication for Canadians, backed by NSERC, so it's been really fun to work on that.
awesome. So Cass, if you want to pull up your slides, or I can pull them up for you if you'd like.
Sure, I can pull them up.
Okay.
Oh man, technology, right? All right. Can we see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So today we're going to be talking about science communication and conspiracy theories. I'm going to go over a bit of what the course actually entails, and then Zara will be talking a bit more about, I believe, how we created the course, and maybe I'll jump in for that too. But just a brief overview of what we discussed for the course. So I already did my introduction. If you'd like to connect with me, Twitter is probably the best place, but I also have a new website, so I will talk about that at the end. So the course is about conspiracy theories, and the definition that I have used in my research for conspiracy theories is typically this one, and that is a secret plan on the part of a group to influence events in part by covert action. So a lot of the time when we hear about conspiracy theories, we think of like kind of the most crazy out there ones, but they're not necessarily that. They can also be totally legitimate. There have been real conspiracies that have been proven, so that's something to keep in mind. But yes, some of them are a bit out there for sure. Like this one, flat Earth, my favorite conspiracy theory. There are people on this planet who believe that this planet is shaped like that. It's flat, and the sun circles around the planet up above. And not only do they believe this, they believe it with such conviction and with such excitement that they'll do scientific experiments to try and prove it, or they have conventions about it. They've got online forums. It's pretty impressive, if I'm honest. But unfortunately, actually, maybe we'll talk about that. Unfortunately, they're not all that, they're not exactly all that innocent, I should say. So I don't know if we'll open up a discussion, but maybe something to think about is, do you know of someone who believes in a conspiracy theory, whether it's about science or health or not something else? I can pretty much guarantee you that you do, because actually most people do believe in one or more conspiracy theories. So chances are good that someone in your close circle does. So conspiracy theories in science and health are nothing new. Some of the most common ones that we hear about are anti-vaxxers or GMOs, genetically modified organisms, is a big one as well. People thinking they're going to make them sick as well. Even bigger ones like HIV not causing AIDS, that sort of thing. Now, a lot of those conspiracy theories seem to go at odds with scientific consensus. But something that's important to keep in mind is anti-science beliefs, or beliefs that run counter to the scientific consensus, are not necessarily the same as conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories have to have that element of covert collaboration on a secret level with an organization like a government. So someone who maybe doesn't believe in evolution because that is what they were taught growing up, that's not necessarily a conspiracy theory that they believe in. It's just something that doesn't align with our current scientific understanding. So I was working on for a while health communication to do with vaccines. And as I mentioned before, vaccination communication is absolutely ripe with conspiracy theories. You hear everything from people who believe that the government is implanting chips into their arms to track them, or it's slow acting poison that will get us all, or it's mind control, or it's big pharma just trying to make money, injecting absolutely nothing into us, and the government is just trying to pad their pockets, all sorts of things like that. And unfortunately, something that I think a lot of science communication scholars did not necessarily see coming was with the pandemic, a lot of them believed that we would move a little bit more into believing in vaccines and believing in science, because vaccines and science are blunting so many of the horrible effects of this crisis. But what's actually happened is it's gone kind of in the exact opposite direction. Now that we are still dealing with this crisis despite the wide availability of vaccines, it's actually pushed a lot of people further into this belief about conspiracies. So people are really drawn to conspiracies because they provide a framework to understand the world. The world is full of very confusing and scary and frightening things, and especially in science, and especially right now, we're literally all dealing with this across the world on kind of an unprecedented scale. And conspiracy theories kind of wrap up an explanation in a nice little bow, and it helps people to make sense of things that don't really seem to make sense. And that is very psychologically comforting to everyone. So there are certain risk factors to becoming someone who believes in conspiracy theories. And the first one is people who are isolated. And as I have said the word unprecedented about 1,000 times already, but so many people are very extremely isolated right now, more so than ever. And belief in these conspiracy theories can give them a sense of community, whether it's online or in person, or even just the knowledge that they believe in something that other people believe in too, can provide a sense of comfort and safety. Second, people who generally don't trust big institutions. So often that's the government, but it can also be healthcare organizations or big pharma. That's a really common one. And sometimes people are just predisposed to that because of how they were taught growing up. But also, some people have pretty good reason to not trust these institutions because they've hurt them before, or people that they love. And then lastly, people who are anti-elites, which essentially means people who are upset with the disparity of power in society, whether it's they're upset that certain politicians or people have, an excess of power and decision-making unelected, or perhaps the wealth gap as well. That's a really common one. People who do not see a lot of problems with this and are very against the people they view as on top. Oftentimes that will propel people to believe in conspiracy theories. But notice how I didn't say like stupid or uneducated or crazy. While there is some correlation between education levels and belief in conspiracy theories, and we could get it there, that is a whole other lecture in and of itself. But those are not the, education is not the biggest risk factor, and certainly it is not intelligence level or, you know, mental stability that forces people into these beliefs. It really has a lot more to do with the emotional side of trying to belong to a group that understands what is going on and the psychological comfort that comes from that. So conspiracy theories, a lot of the time, people believe that they're only stoked by fringe groups. I mean, just now, I live in Ottawa in Canada, and we have a gigantic convoy of trucks coming to Ottawa to the point where we're not really supposed to go outside in my neighborhood right now because they're coming to protest the mandates, the COVID mandates here. And yesterday, I believe it was, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, posted on Twitter something about them having unacceptable beliefs and how they were a fringe small minority of truckers. But in actuality, yeah, maybe it's a minority of truckers, but it is a massive, massive convoy with support that ranges across the nation, has even bled into the States. Donald Trump Jr. posted about it a couple of days ago. And so it's really not a fringe group that believes or a fringe group that has these beliefs. It's actually a lot more widespread than we think. But how can we blame people for this? It's not even just stoked by these, you know, these bad faith actors that we think of when it comes to disinformation, people who are on purpose trying to stoke misinformation or mislead people. It's also people who are actually in charge that end up stoking a lot of these fears. Like this was this was a tweet from 2020, February 29th. So kind of right before all of the COVID shutdowns started happening. And I highlighted some communication issues with this tweet. So one problem is he had a lot of statements of certainty when everything was anything but certain. So saying they are not effective, that is quite the assertion to be making without very much evidence. And keep in mind, this is from the Surgeon General in the States. So, you know, they really shouldn't be doing that. It's condescending, saying seriously people, you know, using caps, that's pretty condescending. It's fear stoking, and it reads a bit as, you know, preaching, which is not necessarily a problem in and of itself, but it does speak to that elite superiority issue I mentioned earlier, where people who are wary of elites tend to not respond very well to this sort of communication. And most importantly, now, of course, we know that the content of this tweet was not accurate. Masks do help with slowing transmission of COVID, and most likely, I mean, I can't speak to this 100%, but most likely the reason that masks weren't recommended from the beginning largely has to do with availability and keeping them from healthcare workers or for healthcare workers. But instead of saying that, we got fed, they don't work. And then governments flipped and said they do work all of a sudden. And it's completely understandable that people see problems with that. You know, it goes much deeper than what people tend to think, but it is completely understandable when governments are flip-flopping how people might think that they have an ulterior agenda. And of course, this is only getting worse and worse with the concept of fake news. So our digital world, where we can access information and news from any source, anywhere, leads to conspiracy theories being promoted on kind of in a very legitimizing kind of way, because right now our kind of truer news sources that are fact checked and people's opinions about conspiracies that are just someone's blog, they can look exactly the same online to the untrained eye. Fake news proliferates in a way that it is virtually indistinguishable from kind of real news, quote unquote. So even people who, are hopeful that they are only sharing true information and they think they are only sharing true information aren't necessarily doing so. And I don't know what to say about this because this is a huge area of study right now. In media studies, I think probably one of the biggest areas of study because it is such a problem and it seems to have very few solutions right now, but it's worth mentioning. But there is one thing that is extremely effective in countering conspiracy theories, and that is building relationships. Remember how I said at a couple of slides ago that one of the key factors for developing these beliefs is isolation. And people tend to believe them because it gives a sense of community. And so by building relationships with people who believe in these conspiracy theories and listening to them and validating their concerns and not necessarily their opinions, but their concerns and the things that they're worried about, and really trying to understand them has been shown to, in many cases, soften these beliefs. So McGill University put out a kind of a cheat sheet for building trust with people who believe in conspiracy theories. And the first one is to listen empathetically. So that does not mean be condescending. It means being open-minded. It means really trying to understand their concerns, even if you disagree with the beliefs. The second is to ask questions sincerely, because it's important to try and understand where these beliefs come from, because it's not about the actual beliefs themselves. It's about what leads people to have these beliefs in the first place. That's really the meat of it. And I think I've seen anyway, that is where the connection really happens, because we're not all that different when it comes to our fears and our insecurities and our worries and our confusion. Just, the way it manifests tends to be different. So you'll find probably more common ground by doing that. And then to prioritize the relationship, especially if this is someone who is, a personal relationship of yours, but in general, people respond a lot better over time when the relationship is prioritized. And yes, a lot of the time, changing people's opinions can take a really long time. So it's important not to alienate people. But most importantly, there's no magic bullet. There's nothing that you can do that will 100% change anybody's mind about their belief in any conspiracy theory. They have to have some sort of seeds of doubt already, and they have to be the one to take ownership and initiate their exit from these beliefs. You can listen and support and help along the way and encourage, but unfortunately, if someone figures out a way to 100% change people's opinions on just about anything, they're going to be extremely, extremely wealthy, because there's just no way to do it that we know of right now. So I'm going to be passing it on to Zara, because she's going to be talking about the course. Here are some of her lovely illustrations from the course that we worked on together. If you'd like to check it out, you can go over to Lifeology's website, where the content kind of from this talk will be in that course, but it is very well illustrated, and it comes up with a few more examples and a bit more tangible kind of solutions for addressing conspiracy theories than I had the chance to address today. So it would be great if you could check it out. Citations. And yeah, thank you so much for coming and listening. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can do so on Twitter, or I have a new website, which is myname.com. So yeah, thank you.
Cassidy? Zara, Zara, did you want to? I don't know if you had anything to share.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
So again, I want to say that I haven't been very educated in the sciences, but I tend to really believe in experts and researchers. I didn't know what to expect when I was handed over this course to illustrate, but I was really, happy that the language was so simple that Cassidy had written out. Personally, I have two conspiracy theorists in my life, an old friend and a relative who's a nurse. So I didn't expect that to apply what I was learning in Cassidy's course to my real life instead of cutting people out, to actually try and be open, but also having the cognitive dissonance of not really knowing how to apply it directly, since I don't know the facts as well as scientists do. Yeah, I tried to apply my skills as best as I could to represent Cassidy's course in a way which is true to my illustrative work.
Awesome, Zara. Well, and please feel free, folks in the audience, to ask questions. I think we had planned to, promote some discussion here. So any questions you have, if you want to drop them in the chat, or we can let you talk. But Zara, just to kind of kick it off, I was wondering if you could chat a little bit about, I know for this course, from the beginning, we had the idea that we wanted to illustrate in a particular way to not have shine any kind of negative light on individuals in this course that we were talking about believing in conspiracy theories. So the kind of tone for the art, was an important piece of that. So I don't know if you want to just chat a little bit about how you thought about that when you started to create the illustrations, or even colors, and it just, yeah.
I tried to keep the colors light, a person who looks normal, and misinformation coming up as a little cute egg, I don't know, a little egg character that you want to love until you get swallowed into it.
Yeah, it was so great. I love that for this course, and just kind of feeling like it's inviting you in, and kind of send that message that anyone is potentially susceptible to to believing things that are not true, and like Hesty said, that it's not related to education or aspects of the person. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? You can drop them just in the chat if you want, or drop them in the Q&A box, but otherwise we can keep going. I had a question for Cassidy. Actually, it came up recently as part of our SciComm program. Just it's sort of a complicated question, so I'm trying to scope it down, but it was essentially just a question of communicating about uncertainty. So in areas, especially around vaccines, where there are these conspiracy theories, how do scientists approach, or science communicators approach communicating about uncertainty around vaccines, for example, when they feel like the other side might be taking that uncertainty and kind of flipping it to say look, scientists don't even know, for example, not getting the vaccines. My response to that was, it's about transparency, about know what your thoughts are in terms of how to address risk communication and uncertainty when that there's conspiracy theories that are going to feed into that.
Yeah, for sure. Transparency usually is a good bet. Kind of in that Surgeon General example that I gave, there's no reason that he should have pretended that it was certain when it wasn't, because that only fuels the fire further. So taking ownership when we don't fully understand and explaining what the rationale is typically works, but with a big caveat in that in science, nothing is 100% certain. Even things like gravity or the theory of evolution, things that have been supported by evidence time and time and time again, to the point where there's complete consensus in the scientific community that they are true. When it comes to science, nothing can really be 100% true, because you can't really prove anything to be true, because you never know if proof in the opposite direction could come up to just, there's one exception to the rule kind of deal. And we have kind of mathematical ways to show that and really measure uncertainty in a scientific way. But the problem is when something is supported by overwhelming evidence in science, but there's like a tiny, tiny chance mathematically that it could not be true, because we're scientists, we're going to say, it's not certain. But what's not certain in a scientific way is not necessarily not certain in kind of our common vernacular that we use. They don't really quite mean the same thing. And so you may have noticed when I was giving my talk, I never said, I hope I didn't. I never said, the things that are true in life. I would always say things that are supported by scientific evidence or the scientific consensus. I never said true scientific facts, because of what I just spoke about. And so I think using that language really helps, because you can say something is scientific consensus and then there can be counter evidence later without it being untrue. But if you say this is 100% true and then counter evidence comes up, then you seem like a liar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there's some element of like communicating about, what certainty means in science versus like in everyday life, just kind of communicating that fact that, just like you said, that all science is to some extent uncertain, and helping people understand the context around that seems like it would help. Awesome. So we have a ton of questions rolling in. I think maybe this was the first one. So this Catherine's asking, can you recommend types of questions to ask when talking to someone who believes in conspiracy theories? That kind of like asking questions sincerely.
Sure. I think it really does depend on the context. But something that you'll find when people have these strong held beliefs is even the smallest prodding they will want to fill in the gaps. So asking really open-ended questions. So like, what makes you feel that way? Or like, what are you worried about? What are your concerns? Like, why do you believe this? Just super, super simple questions like that. Chances are good they're going to want to fill it all in. And then you can ask more specific questions after they've prompted you in the direction that the conversation is going. But yeah, typically these conversations flow really easily if you're listening empathetically. And when it comes to the type of questions to ask, other than them being open-ended and non-judgmental, the most important thing, honestly, is just body language. People respond much more to body language than what you're actually saying. So really, really making an effort to be interested in their answers is far more important than any specific one question that you could ask.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. And Zara, jump in anytime you want to answer anything too. We have a question. Do you guys have any tips for how to combat conspiracy theories online, especially on social media? I guess related to that, maybe it's harder to build relationships there. Yeah, it's a lot harder than having one-on-one conversations. So should we just avoid arguing there? Are there ways to promote good information online?
Yeah, you're completely right. So unfortunately, a lot of these issues online are very systemic, and this is kind of the $1,000,000 question that a lot of kind of big tech organizations are dealing with. There are certain tactics that they're employing, like different algorithmic techniques, or, they'll put, I don't know if you've ever seen a little caption at the bottom of a news story on Facebook or whatever that says this hasn't been supported by evidence, or this hasn't been fact checked, or best if you are on Twitter and you retweet a news article but you haven't opened the article, it'll be like, do you want to read this before you retweet it? So little things like that. There is some evidence that those seem to be helping, but of course, one, it's so new that we don't have long-term evidence about its effectiveness, and it's very hard to measure. And two, that's not really something that we as individuals can really take on. I would say when it comes to arguing with strangers online, it is extremely, extremely difficult to build relationships. If you find a way to be able to, like if you are in kind of a community forum and you already have something in common, then it's a little bit more possible. But when it comes to just random comment threads on Facebook, I wouldn't even recommend engaging. There's some evidence to suggest that debunking things can work, but we want to just publish debunks and kind of more accurate content online for people to come across and digest in their own way, as opposed to being lectured about it. That was a bit of a roundabout way of saying, try your best, but arguing with people on Facebook is almost never effective. Unfortunately, I wish it was, because I think it's one of all of our favorite pastimes, but yeah.
Yeah, that's so hard. I mean, I guess if you know someone, you know, personally, you can maybe take that conversation offline, but I think just that risk of like further entrenching them in their beliefs, you know, surely is there, especially perhaps, you know, particularly with those online, with going to social media for that. Wes is asking, while we're on the topic of debunks, debunks require someone to misunderstand something first to debunk it. Are there more active ways to proactively help demystify new and emerging science?
Yes, there are. And it really comes down to just the foundations of good science communication. We need to focus as a science communication community on, from the get-go, making the science accessible and understandable and inviting, and packaging it in ways that people can digest. And as well, humanizing scientists and researchers, because a lot of the time people really believe that scientists are people holed away in their labs who are just obsessed with math and they don't have any social skills, which, you know, every once in a while is true, but it's not usually true. But in that indirect kind of building relationships sort of way. So what the person who commented, thank you for your comment, what you're referring to is pre-bunking, that's what people call it. So it's debunking before anyone has the chance to believe anything false. And pre-bunking is much, much more effective and easier than debunking. But unfortunately, sometimes we are confronted with things, it's already too late. People already believe something false. So
yeah, I guess related to that, the question at Zara, like, do you have any thoughts on, I guess art's role, since we're here talking about, you know, science communication and visuals too. Do you think, or have you seen that art can play a role in that kind of making the science more accessible and letting people kind of have agency over interpreting it themselves, kind of thing? You know, and might that help this problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
I really believe in the arts as much as I believe in science, even though I don't understand it. I really believe in the effectiveness of art. And I feel like we're so engaged with visuals on a day-to-day basis that it can attract people or appeal to people in a way, or engages people to think. Yeah.
Awesome. We could probably take a couple more questions. There's a question, do you have any examples of groups or organizations or people that you think are doing a really good job at combating misinformation or dealing with conspiracy theories?
one of the ones that comes to mind is there's an organization called Science Up First here in Canada. And it is kind of a collective of science communicators and health professionals and scientists. And they have a few spokespeople who are doing a really good job, I think, in a lot of ways. Timothy Caulfield is one of the kind of main spearheading people of that movement. And basically their function is exactly that, trying to make science accessible and debunking and whatnot. But I haven't studied them closely enough, nor have they been around long enough for me to really definitively say how effective they are, but I have a good feeling about them. So I would say they would be good to check out.
Nice. Thanks, Sarah. Do you have anyone in mind?
I think you guys did a pretty good job.
Thanks. Yeah, we I mean, to Cassidy's point though, like you know, I would think there's more research needed around these things of like looking at actual effectiveness of these of communication pieces we put out. I hope the Lifeology courses might make a difference, but in the end, unless we kind of, measure people's kind of attitude changes, and probably one piece of content's not going to do that, but there's probably room for a lot of research around like how effective is the content that we're putting out there.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I should have mentioned is, again, because I haven't done the research on these organizations specifically, I don't want to say 100%, but another group that I see is kind of just generally certain public health units, not so much on a large scale, not so much, the government of Canada, not doing the best, but like Ottawa Public Health here, they have won kind of like a lot of internet awards and things for their stellar communication and making it accessible. And I have a feeling that kind of smaller, more localized approaches like that are more kind of human and more community-based should probably help too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. Are there any final questions in the last few minutes? Or if there are, drop them in the chat. But otherwise, yeah, thanks Cassidy and Zara so much. And it was wonderful working on this course together too. Yeah, I was wondering maybe in the last few minutes, if no one has any questions, maybe you could share just like why this was topic or this course was like personally important to you. Like, I don't know, do you have any stories from conspiracy theory? Yeah, the conspiracy theories in your own life or talking to people and seeing a difference.
For me, the friend who's a conspiracy theorist I saw her exceedingly lose more and more people in her life. So I think this course helped me not cut her out and try to be open to the relative too.
Yeah, it's tough. For me, the reason I got interested in this topic in general is because I've always been interested in both science and communication, and this is kind of a very natural intersection of both. But the reason that I started doing research in this area in the first place, like academic research, was I remember right at the beginning of COVID, what really inspired me I read a news article about a young girl with cancer, and her parents deliberately exposed her to COVID to try and get it over with because they didn't believe that it was as bad as the government was making it out to be. They believed in the conspiracy that it was just government control, and she died. She was a young girl, I think she was 11. And I don't know, that story really hit me. And that was just at the beginning of COVID. And we've seen things like that happen over and over and over since. So for me, it's because these issues have really serious consequences that it's important to me.
Yeah. I mean, that story says so much too about, I know Rayhana did a webinar, one of our first webinars on like empathy, and she was talking about like that, some people in the anti-vax community, and just like, I mean, that example, just goes to show like, I mean, I'm sure they were trying to do the best thing for their daughter, like, so these beliefs weren't just, something they held on to lightly. They really like took them to heart. So addressing those, you definitely certainly couldn't address those by making the person feel stupid or making light of their decisions, because it's pretty serious. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. This will be recorded, and so all the recordings for our past webinars are posted on that same like events and webinars on the Lifeology website, where you can sign up for new webinars. So a recording will be posted there, and definitely check out the Lifeology course that was created on conspiracy theories. And there's a little activity, there's a little like things you can do within that course as well to learn more. Yeah, and then reach out to us anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for hosting. It's been a blast.
Sweet, thank y'all so much. All right, bye.